Sorry, I bumped the wrong button. I have to make sure when I record not to lean the book against the laptop. So I got to work on that. We're a work in progress. Here we go. Abrasive discs, also known as cutting wheels. Abrasive wheels or flat discs fitted to bench, pedestal, and portable grinders. So, right off the bat, abrasive discs can encompass a particular type. Abrasive discs. There's several different. There's floppy discs. That's basically a wheel comprised of about 140 separate little squares of sandpaper that have been glued in a circle and then trimmed to be round. You guys have seen me work with them. For those of you who have been near me when I've done welding stuff, and really it's the flappy disc is one of the best products out there. Another abrasive disc is the grinder wheel, which is it's about as thick as a pencil. It's a disc around 4.5 inches wide with a 1/2 inch arbor, which means the hole in the middle. The hole in the middle is called the arbor, and it's usually like a 3/8 or a 1/2 inch. Uh, the Milwaukee that I use at work is a 3/8 arbor. So if we took a micrometer and measured the distance, it'd be 3/8 of an inch. That's what fits in the middle. Um, you have a grinding wheel that's really to remove lots of metal. You want to really grind away metal, you use a grinding wheel. It's loud, it's noisy, it's vibrating, it's lots of sparks, a lot of dust, a lot of junk falls off of it. Basically, it's so you have fine sand. If you went to the Bahamas or like the Bimini or St. Croix, Jamaica, the sand on the beaches is super fine. It's almost like silt. Then you go to places like Maine, Kittery, Maine, and the sand, the actual little blocks of sand, the grains of sand, they're huge, they're massive. They're like pieces of rice. So, anyways, what manufacturers have done is they've taken these various sizes of sand, silicon carbon. It's a silicate. And what they've done is they've glued the sand together using a resin, a heat resistant resin, and they've basically created a puck, uh, a hole in some plaster. They form a mold and they pour in the sand and they tamp it down, and then they cover it and they inject glue into it, and then they heat it. And when it's done, it comes out of the oven. They crack open the case, and there is your grinding wheel. Okay, it's just glue with sand with glue in it. Okay, that's all. That's all it is. It's not this magical rock they've found and they go and they cut it out of the ground. Not at all. They make it. Now, a very fine grinding wheel will be almost white in color, and it's super soft. It's almost for polishing. Then you get into there's an all black one that's almost as fine, and then you get down into the gray colors where the grains of sand get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what happens is that the sand wears away at the steel and it grinds it away until you get to the thickest, and this is grit. So when we talk about the various sizes of sand granules that they put inside this mold puck and then inject with glue or polymers, what we're talking about is the grit. So the finer the grit, like a 2000, means you need like what's a fun way of trying to remember this? Oh, okay. So a 2000 grit, you need a microscope to see at 2000 magnification to see the grit. At 4000, you need 4000 magnification to see the grit. 180 grit, you just need a magnifying glass. You're magnifying it 180 times, and there's the grit. At 60 grit, you're basically using your eye. You can see the separate sand granules, the little pebbles, the little rocks. You can see them all on your own. They're big and chunky, like chunky peanut butter. Blah. Right? But it's on a wheel. It's very coarse. That's for removing large chunks of steel very, very quickly. Cutting discs are a thing on their own. They're usually a very fine grain of sand or whatever medium they choose. It doesn't have to be grains of sand. I know there are companies out there that put out like a metal glass mix. Silicon carbide, aluminum, where they use little flakes of aluminum in it. There's all different companies. They find all different kinds of things to use as an abrasive. An abrasive is nothing more than something that takes another thing away. The word abrasive means to rub away in a very ouchy manner. Scrapes, digs into. Abrasive. People have even been called, you have a very abrasive personality. Man, the heck with you. It's an abrasive personality. It rubs people the wrong way. So abrasive. Cutting wheels are very specific within the grinding wheel family of abrasive wheels. Grinding wheels, they take probably either fiberglass or carbon fiber or aramid or some other fiber matrix. They add a little bit of superfine sand and they inject, oh, look at my alarm. And they inject the polymer into it and they make it super thin, almost as thin on the little Dremel tools. You guys have seen those? There's a little handle and right? Dremel tools, about this big. They're paper thin. And if you come off axis a little bit, snaps the cutting wheel right off. If you don't get off axis, if you keep it perfectly straight, perpendicular to whatever you're cutting, those little Dremel tool cutoff discs, holy cow, they can go through nails and they can go through locks. They can go through all kinds of stuff. They're spinning at outrageous speeds too, 10, 15,000 RPM. Crazy, crazy quick. You can't expect the larger abrasive 4.5 inch, 6 inch, 8 inch, 12 inch cutting wheels to spin the same speed. Be far too dangerous. Literally, a piece of that comes off of a big one and take your arm off. A little one, you just got to wear safety glasses because there's no mass to it. A little chunk of 15,000 RPM and a little wheel that shatters apart. It goes into your finger like, oh, pluck it out and throw it away. But a big 12-inch circular disc spinning at 20,000, 15,000 RPM, and a chunk of that comes flying off. And you're like, hey, has anyone seen my finger? Anyway. Yeah. It's like, let me show you a magic trick. And I'm on the wrong side of the screen doing the magic trick. You see the trick. Anyways, so cutting wheels are flattened pieces of, and they use the carbon fiber to hold everything together. Because if you just spun a mixture of glue and ultrafine sand and made it really thin and flat, and then made a little 3/4 inch circle of it and spun it to 15,000 RPM, it would just shatter. It would fly apart. So the fiberglass is there to act as a structural support as it spins, so it doesn't fly apart at the edges, and allows the cutting surface to actually cut into the metal as you work the wheel in. What else? So we always have to remember to wear PPE when we do this. We always have to remember to wear gloves and glasses as part of the PPE, and boots. Safety boots, super important. Cutting wheels are no joke. I genuinely do know two specifically in the Chicopee, Springfield, Holyoke area. I personally know of two welders that have lost, one lost a pinky and one lost like complete pinky, like no pinky. Had his hand over something, was in, and it grabbed and jammed right up in his hand. It was hanging off like with meat. And when he got to the hospital, they just went snip. This was years ago. He's in his 50s. He cut his pinky off when he was like 20. And he's fine. He's fine. But he definitely lost a pinky to a grinder. And I know another guy. I wasn't really good friends with him. I was good friends with the guy who lost his pinky. But I know another guy who lost, like, this tip of his middle finger is shorter. Like, it looks like that. Yeah, it looks like that. Where they reattached, it got cut. And when it cut, it like shattered the bone. So what they did was they reattached it, but they didn't. They took away all the grounded out bone, and they just made it shorter. It's weird looking, but it is what it is. They reattached the finger. So yeah, grinding wheels and cutting wheels are no joke. They'll lop your finger right off before you know it. So you always have to make sure your grinding wheel or your cutting wheel has a safety shield on it, so that only the cutting surface is cut and the safety wheel protects everybody up on top or in front. That's why our grinder at work always has those clear Lexan screens in front of it. They want to protect from not only the wheel coming apart, but the things you're grinding. Make sure that those things don't come apart improperly. So we've talked about grit. The lower the number, the larger the grain of sand or rock, right? We've talked about the arbor hole, which is the centering hole, the hole that it holds onto it in the middle. So on my grinder, you put the cutting disc on the arbor hole, and then you have a nut that snugs it down. We talked about PPE. We talked about the different types and sizes, from a Dremel Tools little 3/4 inch cutting wheel out to a 12-inch cutting wheel. I'm sure if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, I like Lowe's, you go and you can see cutting wheels that they have. I know for a fact, the coolest ones. So the two cool ones that you can get at Lowe's, they've got this huge 28-inch concrete and mason blade. It looks like a big pizza plate. It's a pizza, right? It's that big silver thing. And it's got these little teeth on the outside edge. And it's used for cutting concrete on like the highway. Like, it has water injectors on the side. You got to hook it up to hoses. It's pneumatically and electro-pneumatic. It's a big electric motor, gas motor, right? And it starts it. Oh, it's so cool. That's not automotive, but it's well, the motor that runs it is a gas motor. That's cool. Uh, but it's really a big. It's really cool. You guys can Google that. Google masonry large concrete cutters, and it looks like a lawnmower, but with the engine not lying down on the side, and then a big cutting wheel and jets and water that, when it spins, keeps the blade cool. And that's another thing. Metal blades need to be cold in order to run. Abrasive discs run better when hot. Don't know why. I think it's about when, not the abrasive disc itself, but the medium that you're cutting, the steel. When the steel starts to get hot, abrasive discs do a really good job digging in at that point. So that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave comments in the sections below. This is my first word of the day in this format, so we'll all work together and we'll all work to get this thing going so it counts towards your daily schoolwork.